Hi doll faces, I thought I would make a video to give you guys some practical tips about meditation. Meditation is something that I have utilised in my own life since I was 19, and I originally started using it to help me control my anger. Believe it or not, I used to suffer with rage. It was a problem and it became increasingly more severe through my teens. And I can't remember how I was introduced to the idea of meditation, but I have a clear memory, which I think may have been the genesis, and it was something that I read in a magazine about guys who were in prison for violent crimes and who were encouraged to take up a meditation practice while they were incarcerated. And the magazine article was just basically about how it completely changed their lives and it turned them around, and it was the one thing about kind of the rehabilitation process, which, let's face it, is non-existent in most parts of the world in prisons. It's kind of about punishment rather than rehabilitation, but it was the one thing about their time in incarceration that made them think when they came out that they would live life in a different way, and this really interested me. And I was a long way from committing violent crime, but I was definitely a very angry girl. I had a lot of pent-up aggression and I couldn't really find many emotionally safe and emotionally relevant outlets for what was going on within me. I just used to lash out. So that's how I came to meditation, and it was only a few years later that I began to see it as an intrinsically spiritual process, and as part of my overall spiritual journey. Actually, meditation came into my life because it needed to, because it was necessary, because I couldn't go on the way I was. So really it was a remedy for a situation that had become untenable for me. And I meet a lot of people who practice meditation who say similar things. I met one woman who I've meditated with several times now at my group meditation practice, who said that she literally started meditating as a last resort because she was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and she couldn't think what else to do. She was doing all of the dietary stuff and whatnot, but nothing was really working, and she tried meditation, and now she's back at work, she's going to silence retreats, she's getting on with raising her children, totally turned her life around. So you know, if I'm not a big enough proponent of meditation already, I would stress to you now that if you don't have a regular practice of meditation and it is something that you've been thinking about and you've been putting it off or procrastinating with it or not truly committing to it, I would say that the rewards are so vast and it really helps you in ways that you never even thought possible. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some things that I would say to you if you are thinking of going into a practice of meditation. The first thing I wanted to discuss was distractions. There's kind of this big misconception with meditation that you need to be in a place with no distractions and that you need to have no noises and you need to have kind of nothing going on around you, and that, you know, if anything comes into your mind that kind of breaks your concentration, then the meditation is screwed and you can't carry on with it. But something that I realised very early on when I was meditating is that the whole point of distraction is not to completely rid yourself of external distraction, but actually to learn how to acknowledge it, because you can't really help but acknowledge it, and then just let it go, release it, let it pass. Distractions can be anything from your own internal frustration, your own sense of, why can't I just be in the moment, I'm thinking about this and it's driving me crazy, that's a distraction. Traffic outside the window, birdsong outside the window, somebody else in the house that made some kind of noise that you weren't expecting. Even your phone tone, if you forgot to set your phone onto silent, you might hear a tone or a vibrate and that might be a distraction for you. Itches and aches and things like that in the body, that's a big one for me. I don't know why, but I seem to get chronically itchy knees sometimes when I meditate. And when I first started getting into my practice, that used to drive me completely balmy. But then I realised that just because your knee itches, or, you know, you hear a car alarm go off, or something weird happens, like that you weren't expecting, that doesn't mean that you need to break the meditation. Evolving with your meditative practice is really about realising that when something like that happens, you acknowledge and then you just release. And that's what I do with itches and with aches and pains and stuff too. And it's actually completely recalibrated my response to pain and my kind of conscious understanding of what pain is to me and how I respond to it emotionally and on a practical level. Meditation has done a lot for me in that way, because I don't break my meditation to scratch an itch. I don't break my meditation to change position. I continue with my meditation and I allow whatever the distraction is to flow over me. It's like a cloud passing. I can acknowledge that little bit of shade that it provides me with, but it's like everything else in meditation. I know it's there, I acknowledge, and then I return to the breath. I return to the inhale and the exhale. And it gets easier and easier to do that as time goes on. So that's really the first thing that I wanted to put out there, is that there is often this misconception that in order to form a deep meditative practice, you actually need to, you know, wait for some point in the future where you have a detached house in the wilderness and where everybody will always respect the fact that you want to meditate, and where there'll be no traffic around and there'll be no random noises and the bin men won't be coming and all that kind of stuff. And that's just not true. You can start your meditative practice today, and you know, you can know for sure that in every avenue, in every walk of life, in every place that you live, in every place in the world, there will be points of distraction in your meditation, but it's about the way that you respond. It's about the way your consciousness perceives and releases those distractions, and how you return to the inhale and the exhale. Sit regularly to heighten your practice. I think this is really important, making a commitment to meditative practice and understanding that you only evolve with your practice and you only heighten your practice through commitment. So sit regularly, and I've said this before in a couple of videos with regard to meditation, that when you meditate, you meet yourself within. This is what a meditation teacher told me once during group practice. She said you meet yourself within every time, and sometimes you meet yourself within and it feels fantastic, and it just clicks into place, and it's like a jigsaw, and it's just perfection, and you know, the time that you spend sitting seems so easy and breezy, and you just become one with it. And then other times you meet yourself within and it's awkward, or it's not quite right, or there seems to be kind of more response to distraction, or there seems to be some frustration. That's normal. It's totally normal, because every time you go to sit, your consciousness is in a different place, and different stuff needs to be shed off or cleansed. I really see meditation as a spring clean for what's inside of me. I see it as a great meditation teacher, whose channel I'll alert you to at the end of this video, said recently in one of his videos about meditation, it's just like cleaning your house, but it's cleaning the house within. And I really feel that. I often feel that you know, when things come to me, like conflict situations, things that I can't quite process, things I'm confused about, I can't get in touch with my inner voice, whatever it is, any frustrations of daily life, I almost hit the pillow as a form of medicine. And I never thought that it would work that way. I never thought it would work quite so effectively, but it really does. So, you know, you meet yourself within each time, and sometimes it's going to be easier than other times. And it's really important for you to know that a committed practice helps you to understand that, rather than seeing those times where it's a little bit awkward, or those times where it's a bit more frustrating, as failures or as signs that you shouldn't practice. So I think that's really important. I also wanted to mention stretching before you begin meditation, and also hydrating yourself before you begin meditation, and potentially also beginning meditation when your stomach is full, or when you have actually nurtured your body for the day. For example, if you're going to sit in the morning, I would recommend not immediately getting out of bed and sitting if it's going to be any longer than 20 minutes, but in fact hydrating yourself a little bit first and taking a little bit of breakfast, if that's how you do things. I know most people do start the day with breakfast. It's not everybody's cup of tea, not everybody's hungry that early in the morning, but it's really important that you limit the potential to experience kind of this growling and these hunger pangs. Again, they can be a distraction that you can get over in your mind, and many times I have done hour-long meditations and experienced hunger pangs halfway through the meditation, and that's actually really interesting, because it changes your response to hunger. And it is one of those things that you acknowledge and then release into the ether and go back to the breath. But it can be quite unpleasant if you're having a long meditation as well. And if you're not that used to the practice of meditation, then it's going to be difficult for you to get over that bump really quickly and easily. So I would just recommend a few basic things, like stretching your body out if you're doing it in the morning, just getting all the little kinks out of you and feeling like you are kind of enlivened, and you feel expansive, and you feel kind of ready to go into it. And hydrate yourself a little, take a little water, etc. Experiment. This is something that I would definitely posit to you as a piece of advice. People experiment with different positions, different sort of sitting, standing, sitting on a chair, against the wall with a pillow, lying down. You know, you see that classic lotus position, but I think everybody is quite aware that it's perfectly acceptable to find your own way of doing things in meditation. And particularly for me, I have a herniated L4 in my spine, so sometimes it's not really conducive to what I have going on with my body to sit in lotus or to sit with a straight back, although I do normally do that, because I just feel that it heightens my sense of kind of melting into the meditation. However, I have meditated sat against the wall or against my headboard with pillows, particularly in the evening if I've been walking during the day and I really can't stand the strain of sitting for an hour or half an hour with a straight back. So experimenting with different positions is good. You can experiment with your eyes open and your eyes closed if you want to. You can meditate looking at a candle if you think that eyes closed isn't quite your cup of tea, or if you try it and you tend to find that the astral kind of calls you and you get all these crazy ideas and visions and you're like, what the hell, I'm supposed to be focusing on the breath, but I'm seeing some kind of goddess wrapped around a dragon in another world with... That's the astral calling you. So you need to come down from the glitz and glamour of kind of like Hollywood on acid, as I like to call the astral realm, and maybe focus on something, place your focus on something, scry with something. You can still focus on your inhale and exhale, but you've got this point of reference. So if closing your eyes does kind of make the astral come upon you, it happens to me all the time. I was meditating once and it was a simple focus on the breath, inhale, exhale, and suddenly I was careering across the astral realm and I met up with Lilith, you know, Adam's first wife, and I didn't know anything about Lilith at that time. I'd never read about her. And I went into the woods for some reason and I saw her and she was stood by a tree stump and there were all these candles and bits of occult paraphernalia everywhere, and then she had an obsidian mirror and it was like, what the hell, this isn't a meditation anymore. But I went with it, and then afterwards I did a bunch of reading about Lilith and I was like, wow, that was probably about my, you know, my desire for autonomy and my desire to speak my truth. And so it can go to some exciting places, but if you want a dedicated meditation practice, then you do find that your imagination becomes unfettered and unchained and goes into what I would call astral territory, then it might be helpful to have something to focus on. A crystal will do just as well. You can even focus on a tree and just the way it's swaying in the wind, anything like that, just to bring yourself into the moment and see that you don't kind of get dragged off into that terrain. I sometimes meditate in water, I meditate in the bath, I find that very cleansing. I also find it's great to do after I've opened and activated my heart chakra, which brings me on nicely to mentioning the chakras actually. Some people do find meditating upon the chakras and activating and opening and cleansing and healing the chakras to be much more fruitful and much more of a preferred method than focusing on the inhale and exhale. And I think that's absolutely fine. I think that I do chakra meditations myself and I do deem it as a slightly different thing from straightforward inhale and exhale mindfulness, but technically they produce exactly the same effect, and I would work on a specific chakra if I felt that I had issues which were relating to that particular etheric field. So if you wanted to practice with guided meditations with chakras and stuff, you could do that, or you could experiment with mantras, you could experiment with prayer beads. My personal suggestion would be to focus on inhale and exhale first and see how you get on with it and commit to that for a certain length of time before you potentially use things like music or mantras or something else. But, you know, everybody's advice will be different. Some people will say that actually focusing on inhale and exhale for any length of time with any length of success would actually come from the heightened form of meditation after you've done things to bring you into it and break you into it, like prayer beads or chants or whatever. So I suppose it depends who you talk to, but for me, I would always say keep things simple in the first instance and focus on the breath. Body awareness exercises are great. You can start with your head and you can go right down to the tips of your toes and just notice how every part of your body feels and just release the tension, or even just acknowledge what each part of your body feels like and what it's doing. Body awareness exercises can be extremely powerful and potent, and I practice them in my group meditation classes, and it really is very relaxing and very rejuvenating. So that would be something to try too. And again, you can find amazing guided body awareness exercises on YouTube if you wanted to do that. And a lot of them, you know, use like soothing music or Tibetan singing bowls, or they might use binaural beats, you know, whatever your flavour, whatever you fancy. Try a few different things out and see how you go. I would suggest using an alarm for a few reasons. This is when you first start out with meditation practice. When you first begin a journey with meditation practice, there can be that frustration there. If you're not getting into the moment, if you're not getting into the mindfulness and getting into the inhale and exhale, or if you feel some sense of urgency, like you want it to end, if you get bored, if you kind of go off track and you have these feelings of what am I doing, I could be doing something else. All of these things, they're not bad, they're completely normal. And they happen to a lot of people when they first start getting into a meditative practice. So I would suggest using an alarm because it takes out your awareness of linear time perspective. It kind of lets you know that something else is in control of when your meditation ends, and it gives you that chance to just really get into it. So I would recommend setting an alarm for 15 minutes time or an hour's time, something like that. And the other reason it's good to use an alarm is because you would be amazed when you get into a deep meditation how physically sensational it is to suddenly hear a sound out of nowhere. I did a group meditation practice with a body awareness exercise first of all, and she kind of guided us down through the body and then just allowed us to sit in that total state of relaxation and oneness for about, must have been about 20 or 30 minutes, you know. And then she tapped a little gong. And honestly, I felt the sound waves go through my entire body. It was such a visceral experience. It was so exciting. I had no idea how deeply I'd gone into the meditative state until that noise called me back into the room. And that's really exciting. So if you can try and find some kind of an alarm which kind of comes on in a soothingly sort of slow way and then escalates, you know what I mean, like those alarms for people that hate getting up in the morning. So it'll start really gentle and then it will gradually edge up into something with more sound, and it will sound like a bell. I know it's electronic rather than have somebody actually bang a gong for you, but I still think it will be very effective. And it will really help you to experience that thing that I experienced, where the sound waves literally ripple through your whole body and your skin reacts, the organ of your skin actually reacts to the sound waves going through the air. It's such an amazing spiritual experience, and if you have never experienced that, then I wish it upon you. I urge you to try it out. So there's two good reasons to set an alarm, and those reasons are kind of like interconnected, so that's a good thing. Practice mindfulness at other times. Don't let your meditation practice be just about sitting and then going on with the day. You will notice incredibly positive experiences from a prolonged period of committed meditation practice. You will, undoubtedly, and maybe you could write about them, maybe you could notice them, maybe you could connect those dots time after time, but you will see that your emotional responses will change, your cognitive inflexibility will lessen, you will feel able to handle conflict situations more, confusion more, high stress. The way you respond to things in your outer life will change as a result of committed meditation practice. It is quite incredible. But I would also say at certain times during the day, just switch on that mindfulness bell and allow yourself to be in the meditative state at other times when you're doing other things, particularly things that you may find monotonous, things that may involve some sense of duty and obligation, which isn't really great. Standing in the queue somewhere, daydreaming. Bring yourself back to the moment and allow a moment of mindfulness to occur. And that is you meditating. That is you bringing your meditative practice into your outer life as well. And when you're doing things like cooking and stuff like that, if you can bring yourself to the moment. I'm not saying daydreaming is bad. I love daydreaming. I'd probably die if I couldn't daydream. And it's where so many of my great ideas come from and stuff. But bringing mindfulness into other times aside from when you're sitting will really help you to elevate your practice when you are sitting. It will really, really help your meditation practice to evolve. So that's something that I would ask you to consider. And I would also ask you to consider potentially trying group meditation practice, because it is a little different, and there are some things about it that I think are quite interesting and which don't necessarily occur when you're meditating alone, in much the same way as there will be differences between group magical and ritual structure and solitary magical and ritual structure. I did make a video about my experiences with group meditation practice. I do talk about meditation in general, but most of it is about my first group meditation practice. So I'll link that video below if you want to watch that, because I think I do go into explaining the ways in which it was different from solitary practice. And always remind yourself of why you started. That's the last thing I would say. Sometimes it is frustrating to continue with the practice. It does feel a little pointless sometimes. Sometimes you worry it might be a waste of time. Sometimes you convince yourself that you don't have time to sit. There's a Zen Buddhist saying, it goes a little something like this: sit meditation for 20 minutes every day, unless you don't have time to sit meditation for 20 minutes, in which case you need to sit for an hour. I love that. I love that saying, and I always kind of reference that saying to people who say that they don't have time to meditate. I think it's interesting how even the mentality that you don't have time to sit with yourself and turn inward, even the mentality of that kind of dictates that you're probably amongst the group of people who need it most. You're the person that really needs to make time for it. in order to switch up your whole mentality to the process of meditation and to the process of what's important, to the sense of your own priorities, etc. So I think just remind yourself of why you started, and, you know, come back to that moment of oneness when you feel like giving in. Stay committed, because you really will see results, and it is a life-changing experience. And finally, one of my favourite meditation teachers, and I know there are very, very many out there who are very admirable and reputable, but one meditation teacher that I so admire is Evan Rock. He has 2 YouTube channels. One is to document his travels and stuff like that, and his diet, but that he has one that is specifically for discourses on meditation and lessons about meditation. And the way he puts his points across and the way he communicates is so peaceful, so mellow, so informative, so sweet and encouraging. I really recommend that if you are thinking of getting into a dedicated meditation practice and you're struggling, or you would like to hear some advice from somebody who is clearly zen as hell and has been meditating for a long ass time, then I would recommend Evan Rock. I will leave his meditation related YouTube channel below. And that's all for now, doll faces. Blessed be, as always, much love.